Paradigm shift. Friends, let's begin in the tradition of the Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh. Can I invite you to uncross anything you're sitting with crossed? Not a reference to a religious tradition, just create some openness. And let's begin together in his tradition of receiving 3 good breaths to remind ourselves of the preciousness of this moment and to just absorb some of the amazingness we have already received today. I want to extend a special shout out to the people who are joining us through the miracle of technology in remote locations. I got to thinking that at the State Theater over there, they're getting, soda and popcorn and jujubes. And over here, you've just got Jew. But it is through the miracle of technology that once insurmountable distances have created an opportunity for a shared experience, a wonderful metaphor for the idea that across what once were insurmountable distances and differences, we are able to come into a spirit of oneness. A few weeks ago, I had the privilege of being with a group of 40 or so Protestant ministers and deeply committed lay people from across several Protestant denominations. We had Baptists and Disciples of Christ and Lutherans and several brands of Methodist. I didn't know that existed. And they came together across these denominations in a Catholic retreat center to spend at least part of their day learning with a Jewish rabbi. And I realized that the game has already begun to change. Sometime during that week, we took a moment to unroll the Torah scroll, the sacred stories of the Jewish people. And when I stood in the Catholic retreat center, looking down the roll of the scroll at these beloved friends from across Protestant denominations, I realized that the game has really changed. And that each and every one of those people, having come into this shared experience, will then go back out into the world and light a little bit of that light for the people in their home communities as well. This was a real game changer. Friends, neuroscientists tell us that in the course of any given moment, in the course of any sentence, we are literally showered with 11 million pieces of data. And at best, on a good day, we are able to pay attention to about 7 of them. So the question arose in human evolution, how do we take this shower of information, this shower of data, and turn it into something that is manageable, that is handleable? Because from the most ancient times in human consciousness, we have been asking the question, who are we? These ancient cave paintings, some of them dating from 40,000 years ago, already asking the question, who are we? And who are we in relation to the natural world around us? How do we learn to not only survive, but thrive in the world? Evolutionarily, this problem of how to take all of that information, all of that data, and make it, in the words of Timothy Wilson, persuasive, useful, and transmissible, that problem was faced and a solution was found. And the solution was storytelling. The storytellers of all cultures are the keepers of the wisdom that is passed from one generation to the next. And it didn't stop with asking the questions about this world and day-to-day existence. Storytellers, even in the most ancient times, were beginning to ask the question, who are we in relation to the cosmos, to the things that are much bigger than us and what we can see and experience in the world. I'm reminded of a wonderful comedy routine when Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks were at a dinner party, And Mel Brooks was playing the 2,000-year-old man. Carl Reiner was interviewing him and asked him about a number of different subjects. And finally, the conversation turned to religion. And Carl Reiner said, well, did you have a supreme being? And Mel Brooks said in his beautiful Yiddish accent, a supreme being? Of course we had a supreme being, and his name was Phil. Carl Reiner said, wow, that's amazing. And Mel Brooks said, oh yes, Phil was incredible. You could go to Phil for anything, for food, water, shelter, whatever you needed. Carl Reiner said, well, whatever became of Phil? Well, says Mel Brooks, one day Phil was walking through the valley, and a thunderstorm rolled in, and he was struck by lightning. And in that moment, we knew there was something bigger than Phil. And friends, a lot of what is paradigm shifting in my business, or my vocation, is the idea that there is something a lot bigger than Phil. At the heart and center of all religious and spiritual experience is the longing that each of us has at the center of our being to touch into that basic goodness that is our true nature, to touch into that little bit of the infinite that lives at the center of our being. For the moment, let's use the Hebrew letter Aleph as an abbreviation of this. It's the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and so it is the number 1. It stands for one-ness. And it also is important because it makes the sound not ah, it makes the sound. It is the sound of silence. Because silence is really the only thing that is large enough to contain the infinite that we seek, that longing that we seek. And so we find ways of coming into this oneness, and it might be prayer or meditation or sacred times or sacred places. And over time, we start to want to transmit these ways into that oneness to our community, to our children. And so we create a little membrane around our ways into oneness. But over time, that permeable membrane that at one time allowed in what was new and allowed us to release what no longer served this coming into oneness, that membrane can become a very solid wall. And perhaps worst of all, you get people like me who are keepers of the way. And our job is to protect the institutions and to protect the denominations and to protect our ways of coming into that one. And our institutions get so busy running around the outside of the circle that we forget that the purpose of the endeavor is to help one another come into that basic goodness that is at the center of our being. And when people come to visit, sadly, they step through our doors often in religious institutions, and that oneness at the center has shrunk to be so small as to be almost invisible. Sadder still, we build walls between our way into the one and your way into the one. And we say, keep your ways into the one out of our ways into the one, because our way is the way. This is when triumphalism, our way is the way, it would just be better if you thought like we think. We build walls between our ways into the infinite oneness. And when people approach us who are spiritual seekers, they often come and they see the walls and forget the center that is at the heart of the endeavor. But there have always been people who were game changers. There have always been people who saw beyond the walls. A Protestant wife and a Catholic husband who could not be buried together chose to have their graves built next to the wall and asked that their children put above that their hands joined, because they remembered and they knew that yes, there is a wall that divides Protestant and Catholic, but it is the love and the goodness and the oneness that is the real message of their lives. There have always been game changers who saw beyond the walls. And one of the things that's really interesting right now in the evolving history of religion is this group called the SBNRs, the spiritual but not religious. Does this describe you? What, is this funny because it's you? And these are the people who are demanding that the people who work in the vocation of religion change the game, because they are longing to enter into that infinite oneness, that basic goodness. But on Friday morning and Saturday morning and Sunday morning, you will not find them sitting in mosque and temple and church. You will find them sitting on the beaches of Lake Michigan, or walking in the woods, or listening to beautiful music, or sitting quietly with friends and having holy conversation. And these people are game changers. The paradigm-shifting, game-changing moment that we are in is called deep ecumenism. The ability that we can honor our own tradition while also being comfortably inspired by the truths of many traditions. And this game-changing is the sacred technology that will change every single one of our institutions. Now, I have to admit to you, I have always been drawn to this. Even as a young child, I really felt the need to stretch, although I was raised in a very committed Jewish home. But with the help of my family, I was taught to stretch and grow. Oh, Catherine, you thought your picture was amazing. My brothers were trying to help me be taller, is what was actually going on here. God bless them. But even at a very early age, I felt drawn to exploring and stepping into new places. A number of years after this photo was taken, I had been dropped off at the mall for my hangout time, and there I ran into a group of Hare Krishnas. And I was fascinated with their ecstasy. I was fascinated with their joy, with their song and their dance. And one of them came over and gifted me with a copy of the Bhagavad Gita as it is. And I tried to read the text, but I simply could not penetrate it at that time. Luckily for me, there were pictures. One of the pictures that appeared in that version of the Bhagavad Gita is an illustration of the 5th chapter, the 18th shloka, which says that the wise person looks into the heart of all beings and there sees the same oneness at the center of all beings. And this picture changed my life, and it changed how I saw everything. One of the ways that this has manifested, and I am very, very blessed to be the co-clergy of a wonderful 20-year-old experiment. As many of you know, every other week for the last 9.5 years, I have flown to Chicago to work Friday night in a synagogue, Friday night and Saturday in a synagogue that welcomes interfaith families. And on Sunday morning, I work at Old St. Patrick's Catholic Church, just in case. My father of blessed memory used to say, you never know who's going to turn out to be right. Housed at Old St. Patrick's Catholic Church is a wonderful experiment called the Chicago Interfaith Family School. And we are perhaps 80 or 90 families with one parent Jewish, one parent Catholic, raising the kids in both religions. And I am honored to be the co-clergy of this school. And I'd like you to meet some of my students. Oops.
Being Catholic and Jewish isn't that hard, actually, especially when you're in family school and you see so many other people that are both Catholic and Jewish. It doesn't seem like a challenge. It seems like a blessing.
The family school really has, I think, unveiled something absolutely beautiful in terms of how families can do this. It's not picking one over another. It's saying this is the gift that we give to each other, and it is the gift that we give to our children.
How do you answer somebody who says, you can't be both?
Oh, I say, yeah, I can. Family school has helped teach me which parts I like of a religion and which parts I want to believe in. It's been really nice to learn about both religions and kind of get to know about the history of both and how they're different alike.
I think that anytime people step into and choose their own faith lens, it's much stronger than if it's just merely imposed on them.
Family school, it makes you curious to learn, not just about your religion, but about who you are.
It's a way to find out who you really are, not just like what your parents are, but you can learn what to be for yourself.
I think it's giving the child and the family together a place to take this journey, a place where it's okay to ask and that all the answers aren't given.
I can now question things and form opinions about my religion, which is something a lot of people can't do. And I've always felt really safe here and having people just like me to grow up with.
God created and God calls us into this mystery, and I think all of us enter the mystery of God through various ways. And it's not to say that one way is right and one way is wrong. Every way is right. Every way that we celebrate through our religious tradition is a way into the mystery of God. I believe that's what God desires. That brings God to light.
Family school brings people together from different opinions and lets you share them.
I think that acceptance is a huge part of family school.
So many other people worldwide have such discrimination against other religions because they only believe in theirs and they really don't understand what it's like to be different religions and they don't accept it. And it's just so nice coming from the family school and having those beliefs from the start.
After 25 years of marriage and 20 years of the family school, I actually see myself as both Catholic and Jewish.
And I do too.
People who are of various traditions fall in love, and I think that the family school is really a great, great testimony of how, we can say, hey, we can be gift to each other. It doesn't mean we have to check somebody's tradition at the door, but it means that we can continue to live into the mysteries of our traditions.
And so for all of you as a group, I bless you to remember that it is vital that you trust your own experience of your inner world. There will be many times and forces and people who try to talk you out of knowing what you know. And I bless you to trust the experience of your inner world.
My view is ever changing, and I don't think it's going to stop changing. I think that there will be days when I lean more towards Judaism, there will be days that I lean more towards Catholicism. And I think that's the beauty of being both, is that, you can believe both, you can believe what you want.
Every year I cry through the entire graduation, as you can see, because this work is one of the great prides of my life. The idea that we are raising a generation of people who are able to think in both and not just the paradigm of either or, is a game changer. But beloveds, as you know, game changing doesn't just happen in the big cities, it's happening right here in our own community. There is a group of game changers at the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Grand Traverse who, for the first time in the history of their denomination, have hired someone of a different religion to be their spiritual leader, Now, I admit it didn't hurt my chances at all that one of the requirements of the job was that my hair color had to match the pulpit cover. But one of the things that is true of all of the game changers that you will hear today is that game changers are the people who are seeking the common heart. And ultimately, in the area of religion and spirituality, game changers are the people who look at the brick walls that separate us and who realize that with just a little bit of rearrangement, those brick walls can be rearranged into stepping stones that remind us of the greatest truth, and that is that there is no them anymore. There is only us. Thank you.